And breaking news coming in this minute as Putin calls Syrian volunteers clamor in Middle East to join Russian forces grows. Syrian army soldiers apply tactical science Z to their equipment, and veterans of the armed forces of the Syrian Arab Republic, fighters of the Christian militia, and former opposition fighters come to the assembly points of the army. They ask if there is a recruitment of volunteers who want to stand up for Russia in the same way that Russia stood for Syria. Important development coming in, and I want to bring in Priyanka, who is with us on the broadcast. Priyanka, where do we see this headed? What is this going to lead to?
Well, definitely, Suesha, very interesting development on the front of Russia as well. We see the kind of messaging that Moscow has given from the very beginning that the escalation took place. Russia also calling for volunteers of Syria, in fact, recalling how Russia had stood up for Syria when Russian air and missile strikes had begun targeting the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, in fact, there in as well for Syria, in the Syrian civil war movement as well. Apart from that, of course, Russia had supported the administration incumbent of Syria against America as well in the United Nations Security Council as well. On that note, I also want to bring in Pathikrit Payne, who's joining us, a political analyst who's joining us on the broadcast. Pathikrit, thank you for joining us on Republic. I want to bring that point to you. We have seen the kind of messaging that has come in from Moscow from the very beginning of the escalation, and now Russia, in fact, Putin, in fact, calling for Syrian volunteers, trying to re-establish the fact that Russia has been a close ally of Syria, and trying to also give this subtle messaging to the US as well. But before I bring you in, Pathikrit, we have our largest team of reporters on the ground. I want to bring in Piyush right now, who's trying to also point towards how Russia had always stood up for Syria, and also giving a subtext message to the US as well. Don't you think so? I would love to hear your point on that.
Well, you are right. See, there are two things that are going to happen. Number one, unfortunately, Ukraine is going to be the new ground for proxy war between the West and Russia. In 2015 till 2015, it was Syria, and the Syrians, frankly speaking, have no love lost for the West, because there was a strong effort by the West to oust the Assad government as part of the Arab Spring Revolution, which started in 2011. It faced a devastating civil war. There were ISIS elements. There were other elements who were against Assad. So there were a multi-pronged war between different groups that were going on, and the West had complete hatred for Assad, who was a Arab nationalist Ba'athist, and the other Ba'athists having already been neutralized, like the Libyan Gaddafi or Iraq Saddam Hussein. So at that time, the Russians came in full force to support Syria and the Assad regime for several reasons. One of the key being Syria gives them access to the Mediterranean Sea. Secondly, what happened is that the Syrians, because of that, actually Assad stayed in power. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for him. So as a result, there is a lot of gratitude that we find the Syrians have for Russia, and that's what you mentioned, that Putin reminded them. The second part of it is that the next layer of warfare or conflict that would happen in Ukraine will be urban-centric warfare in every street and every nook and corner, which is going to be very, very dirty. I mean, that's not the war that you can simply win by bombarding a place. That's the first round that's going on, or that might end before the convoys enter, and it's going to be a bloody war, because the Ukrainians have been armed with all kinds of anti-tank guided missiles and Stinger missiles. So both the Syrians and the Chechen fighters, which the Russians have brought in, are considered to be expert in urban-centric warfare. They are supposedly very fierce and ruthless, and especially the Syrians, given the condition of their economy, they have very limited opportunity in Syria. So if they get an opportunity to fight it out, they will fight it out for money. So there is that you can say it, mercenaries of Russia will be fighting against mercenaries sent by the West.
The very fact that if this gains momentum,